Have you ever stood in the middle of a grocery store aisle staring at two different brands of olive oil and felt a sudden, inexplicable tug toward the one on the left? There's no logical reason for it. The labels are nearly identical, the prices are within pennies of each other, and you haven't read a single review for either. But something deep in the basement of your brain is whispering, that one. For most people, this is a minor moment, easily ignored in favor of checking the expiration dates. But for a specific group of people, that whisper isn't just background noise, it's the primary driver of their entire lives. We often call them gut-driven or intuitive. But the psychology behind why some people trust that internal compass while others demand a spreadsheet of data is far more complex than just being impulsive. It's actually a sophisticated, high-speed form of data processing that most of us don't even realize we're doing. We tend to think of intuition as this magical, airy-fairy thing, like a psychic connection to the universe. But if we look at it through a psychological lens, it's actually more like a blink of extreme expertise. Imagine your brain is a massive, dusty library filled with every single thing you've ever seen, felt, or experienced since the day you were born. When you're faced with a choice, your conscious mind, the part of you that's currently listening to my voice, is like a librarian trying to find a specific book by walking through the aisles one by one. It's slow, it's methodical, and it's exhausting. But your gut is like a supercomputer that can scan every shelf in the entire library in a fraction of a second, find the patterns, and throw the answer at you before you've even finished the question. People who trust their gut aren't ignoring logic. They're using a version of logic that moves too fast for words to catch up. Think about the way some people can walk into a room and instantly feel a vibe. Maybe they're at a party and within 3 seconds, they've decided they don't trust the person by the snack table. To an outsider, that seems judgmental or even irrational. But for the intuitive person, their brain has already subconsciously cataloged 1,000 tiny data points. The way that person's smile didn't quite reach their eyes, the slight tension in their shoulders, the way they interrupted a waiter. This is what psychologists call thin slicing. It's the ability of our unconscious to find patterns in situations based on very narrow windows of experience. People who lean into this aren't just guessing. They are highly tuned instruments, sensitive to the micro moments that the rest of us might miss because we're too busy overthinking the guest list. This brings up a fascinating physiological element often called interoception. It's a fancy word for how well you can sense the internal state of your body. Have you ever noticed that gut feelings actually happen in your gut? There's a reason we don't call it a shoulder feeling or a toe feeling. The human digestive tract is lined with a network of neurons so complex it's often referred to as our second brain. When your brain perceives a pattern, maybe a threat or a golden opportunity, it sends a signal down the vagus nerve, causing that literal sinking feeling or those butterflies. People who trust their gut are usually people who are highly interoceptively aware. They are literally more in tune with their heart rate and their digestive signals. They aren't just thinking their way through life. They are feeling their way through it, using their physical body as a biological Geiger counter for truth. Now, you might wonder, why doesn't everyone do this? If we all have this superpower, why are some of us paralyzed by analysis paralysis? The difference often lies in how we were raised and the environments we inhabit. We live in a world that worships the age of reason. From the moment we start school, we are told to show our work and provide evidence. We're taught that if you can't explain why you made a decision, the decision isn't valid. For many people, this slowly mutes that internal signal. But the gut trusters are the ones who, for whatever reason, kept the volume turned up. Maybe they had a parent who valued emotional intelligence. Or maybe they're just wired with a slightly more active right hemisphere. They've learned that while the conscious mind is great for taxes and IKEA instructions, it's actually quite poor at predicting human behavior or spotting a creative breakthrough. There's a beautiful, almost poetic irony here. The more experienced you become in a certain field, the more your gut becomes your most reliable tool. Think of a master chess player or a seasoned firefighter. They don't sit there and weigh 20 different options when the pressure is on. They just know the right move. That's because their library is so well organized and so vast that the pattern recognition happens instantly. The psychological term for this is recognition-primed decision-making. The person who trusts their gut is often someone who has allowed themselves to fail enough times that their subconscious has built a massive database of what wrong looks like. They've turned their past mistakes into a silent internal GPS. But what about the dark side? We've all seen people make gut decisions that were absolute train wrecks. This is where the psychology gets really interesting. Trusting your gut requires a high level of self-honesty because our gut can easily be hijacked by our baggage. Sometimes what we think is intuition is actually just anxiety or an old trauma masquerading as a warning. If you grew up in an environment where change was always bad, your gut might scream no every time a great new opportunity comes along. The truly intuitive person isn't just someone who blindly follows every impulse. They are someone who has done the deep, often painful work of distinguishing between a soul signal and a fear reflex. They've learned to tell the difference between the sharp, clean ping of truth and the heavy, muddy thud of insecurity. There's also a strange, quiet courage in being a person who trusts their gut. It's a lonely path sometimes. When you make a decision based on an intuition, you can't point to a chart or a graph to justify yourself to your boss or your partner. You just have to stand there and say, I can't explain it, but I know this is the way. It's a form of radical self-trust that flies in the face of our data-driven society. In a way, these people are the last rebels. They are the ones who refuse to let an algorithm tell them who to date or what career to pursue. They understand that while logic can keep you safe, only intuition can make you feel alive. Logic builds the house, but intuition is what makes it a home. I often think about the metaphor of the internal compass versus the external map. Most of us spend our lives staring at the map. We look at what society says, what our friends say, and what the data says. But maps are static. They don't know that there's a new storm coming or that a bridge just washed out. The person with the compass, however, doesn't need to know exactly where they are on the grid. They just need to know which way is north. They can navigate through the fog and the darkness because they aren't looking at the ground. They're feeling the pull of the needle. It's a more fluid, adaptive way to live. It allows for spontaneity and lucky breaks that the map readers will never experience because they're too busy making sure they stay within the lines. If you're someone who struggles to hear that inner voice, or if you've spent years suppressing it in favor of being sensible, I want you to consider that your gut isn't trying to sabotage you. It's actually your oldest friend. It's the part of you that's been watching your back since before you knew how to talk. It's the survivor in you. When you start to pay attention to those small physical cues, the sudden tightness in your chest when a deal seems too good to be true, or the lightness in your step when you meet a certain person, you're not being irrational. You're being hyper-rational. You're tapping into a system that has millions of years of evolutionary testing behind it. Maybe the next time you feel that pull, instead of immediately asking, why? Or looking for a reason to talk yourself out of it, you could just try leaning in. Start small. Trust your gut on what movie to watch or which route to take home. Watch how it feels to let the librarian take a break and let the supercomputer do its work. You might find that your life becomes a bit more colorful, a bit more surprising, and a lot more you. Because at the end of the day, the psyche of the gut truster isn't about being right 100% of the time. It's about the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're finally listening to yourself. So, I'm curious. When was the last time your gut told you something that made absolutely no sense at the time, but turned out to be exactly right? Was it a job you didn't take, a person you avoided, or maybe a random turn you took down a street you'd never been on? I'd love to hear those stories in the comments. We spend so much time talking about the logical part of our brains. Let's give a little credit to the silent partner that's been running the show all along. If you found this dive into the intuitive mind helpful, stick around. We have plenty more to explore about the hidden gears of the human experience. Until next time, maybe try listening to that whisper. It usually knows what it's talking about. Would you like me to help you brainstorm some specific gut-feeling scenarios to include in the comments section to get the conversation started?